I'm going to show you our method for making metal parts out of 3D printed PLA parts. We'll be using the 3D printed template in a plaster mold. We're going to fill this with plaster and then get rid of all of the PLA and then these added foam and plastic parts, and that will create the void that we can pour the metal into. I'll be casting the bell upside down and at a little bit of an angle, and I've added a sprue here. This is where I'm going to be pouring the metal into, and I just hot glued this piece of foam on so that I have a nice big spout that I can pour the metal into. And these are my vents. This is just PLA filament before it goes into the printer. I hot glued it here and here to let the air escape. As the metal goes into the mold, the air will be able to come right back out so we don't have bubbles. I put it on the high point right here where the ringer will attach. And I also put it on the lowest point right here on the strap handle of the bell. This can will be full of plaster, but rather than mixing the plaster, putting this in and pouring the liquid plaster on there, I'm actually going to be putting dry plaster in here. And while it's a powder, I'll tap it down to get rid of all of the air bubbles and put water on the top, let it soak all the way through, and this is what we end up with. The finish is pretty good. We don't have a lot of air bubbles, and we didn't need to use a vacuum chamber or anything. I've also got holes on the bottom of the can that are taped up right now, but I can just remove the tape after I put the water in. But that's how I know that the water has gotten all the way from the top and has soaked down through to the bottom. When we start seeing water drip through these holes, we know that the entire can of plaster has had water saturate it, and we can just let it set. So we'll start adding plaster to the can, just dry in here at first, and we'll put in the bell. The plaster goes in around it. And I'm just going to tap it down like this. We'll add water to the top slowly. Also, the vent, two vents and the sprue are uncovered, and that's important. And now that it's not powdery, it's all a little bit wet, I can just pour it on without causing a big problem. You can see it bubbles a little bit. I think the water is displacing some of the air that may have been trapped inside there. And we want to keep adding water until we see it coming out the bottom. And if there's any left on top when it starts dripping out of the bottom, we can drain it off. We don't want too much water. Our mold has been drying out for a few days now, and we're gonna put it in the Paragon to melt out all of that plastic and foam. I have all my metal weighed out to pour. I've got 90% copper. Here's just a bunch of tubes, and then 10% pewter, which I'm using as tin. I'm using a steel can as my crucible. It's important to note that this is a continuous joint on the bottom. There's no solder, so I won't have the bottom fall out on me. I've also just used some pliers to make this little spout on the front. It's been a few days since the mold was poured, and it's shrunk a lot. You can see it's receded from the edges. I modified these pliers to have extra long handles. You don't want your hands anywhere near that heat, but I can pull it out real nice, and I'll wash it out. All of that coating has been burned off. We're at about 1400 out of 2000 degrees to melt the copper. We're going to be pouring right here into the sprue, and any extra material, I've got my ingot mold set up as well. And I was not expecting it to get quite this bright orange. I'm hoping that the steel is still firm, and it looks like it is. I'm using a steel can instead of a crucible. I know that steel won't melt under the temperatures I'm using, but it is still pretty thin, and I'm concerned that there's a possibility it could maybe deform under the heat. So I would recommend using a crucible instead of a steel can if you're casting anything at this temperature. We're at 2000 degrees now. I'm going to check and see if we've got melted copper. You can see where the liquid is on the bottom of the can right there. I'm going to open and see if it's all melted. If all my copper's melted, I'll drop in the tin. I'm going to put the pewter in now. I dropped the tin in and I was about to pour, but the can is actually a little bit stuck to the bottom of the Paragon oven. So I'm just going to wait and let it get back up to temperature. I'm not sure why it's stuck, and I don't want to be too aggressive with it. It's a lot cooler now. I'm still going to dunk it in water, but you can see that when I started picking it up, all of the rest of the steel just crumbled away, and there's probably some bronze in here. I'm going to cool it off, and I think that this white oxide on top is probably tin oxide, so we're going to have a lower tin content than I wanted. So I cleaned the ingot up a little bit. There's still some steel on the bottom that's not quite scraping off very well. But you can tell that it's not homogeneous. It's got a more coppery color down here. But over here, this is looking a little more bronzy. So, not exactly sure what the composition is. Since we had all that oxide on the top, it's probably less than 10% tin. But it'd be hard to tell exactly what it is. We're trying our crucible this time, and I'm about to drop in the tin. I think that I probably didn't have quite enough metal. I thought that I overestimated. So I'm wondering if maybe there's a cavity in there somewhere. I may just not have had enough metal, but I was hoping that it would come all the way up to the sprue. It's been cooling for about a half hour now, so we're going to take it out of the mold and see what we've got. Well, I must have really underestimated how much metal to put in here because you can see the bell only came to there. Should have been all the way up to here. And that's what we've got out of there. It's a little bit hard to tell right now, but I'm actually really liking this finish, especially compared to last time I did it. If you want to cool it off, it'll make it easier to work with. So far, I'm pretty happy about this finish. In fact, on the inside, you can see these 3D print lines where it was printed the PLA. I'm going to go ahead and clean the rest of it up, but it's looking promising. No bubbles or anything. Now we can really start seeing the detail come through. I put some goldenrod flowers on here. You can see them. Looks like up here it got pretty rough. Something must have happened in the mold. This should all be smooth around here. Also this, I noticed as an angle, it should be up a little bit more like that. This is just our vent. We can cut that off. That's supposed to be there. And I'll take it to the wire wheel. Here it is. A little bit shinier. I really enjoyed this project. Definitely learned a lot of things that I need to improve upon. But overall, I think the resolution was good, and certainly be doing another revision of it.